All right, everyone. Welcome to another Third Apron podcast live stream. I'm Yossi Goslin, NBA salary cap analyst. And today I'm excited to discuss the New York Knicks. This is team 26 of my offseason preview series. Make sure you're subscribed to Third Apron on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast, and the newsletter on Substack. Eventually, I'll get into more deeper salary cap analysis on the Knicks and what they can end up doing this offseason. And make sure to follow me on Twitter at Yossi Goslin, Blue Sky, and Twitter. And joining me to discuss, got Knicks reporter for SNY, my dear friend, Ian Begley. Ian, how are you doing today?
What's up, Mr. Goslin? How are you, man? I'm happy to be here talking off-season, salary cap, all that fun stuff with you.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. It's been a long time coming. I'm glad you can come here. A little change of plan. CP was supposed to be here. Yeah, he couldn't make it, unfortunately. But yeah, let's just get right into it. I suppose we should just get into the actual off season. Lot of rumors recently, a lot of smoke, a lot of things that are trying to suss out what is real, what's not. But let's just kind of get into, I guess we could start bigger picture and get down to, some of the lower end moves that they might end up doing. But I'm looking at their payroll right now. They're going to have like a very similar situation as last year where they already have a pretty high payroll. They have their top 6 guys, 11 guys under contract. They're in the tax over the first apron and below the second apron. You can thank Jalen Brunson for the Knicks being below the second apron because that extension he signed, if he was going to be getting a max this year, they would have a way more expensive roster, much less flexibility to do stuff. So last offseason, they overhauled the core. Part of it was because Isaiah Hardenstein, he left and there was nothing the Knicks could have done about matching an offer or anything like that. They also identified Mikal Bridges, Karl Anthony Towns as guys they want to build around. And now they have their top 5-6 guys set. And it worked. They went to the conference finals. But in the process, the bench is very light. And it had to, and there was not much they could really do about that because they needed to reserve all their flexibility so they could pull off all these moves and stay within the second apron. That was basically the restriction. So the fact that they made it this far under these circumstances, it's pretty incredible. But yeah, they've got their core established, and for the most part, it seems like they have their top 6 guys. I would guess they want to stick around with them. And the main focus would be just building out the bench. Now that could be their main focus this offseason. But of course, they could make a big change. There's a lot of big names they've been linked to, rumored with, like Kevin Durant, Giannis, which would require a drastic shakeup if they were able to get one of those guys. So, I mean, how do you feel about the possibility of the Knicks shaking up their core yet again after the run they had to get one of these guys if possible?
Look, I think when you're talking about possibilities, probabilities, it's always most probable that they would do changes to the bench and then you move forward with that core. But obviously, you talked about it, the landscape here with Giannis Antetokounmpo, who told a media outlet overseas that he wants to be back to try to win a championship with the Bucks. If that's accurate, then that means he's staying in Milwaukee. I don't know. I haven't been able to check out that thoroughly, but if he said it and he meant it, then he's off the table. And then you have Kevin Durant in Phoenix. Yeah, that trade I'm sure will happen here ahead of the draft, and maybe the Knicks touch base. Maybe they check the price, they kick the tires, but ultimately, I still don't think that Durant would end up here in New York. And so, if you're taking those two off the table, I'm sure there are other players that will become available that maybe we're not even talking about right now. But if you're talking about a big shakeup to this core, if Durant's not going to be an option and Giannis is not an option, I don't know which way they would go to really blow up the core in a way that made sense.
I'm with you on that, especially with KD. I think they're better off keeping their current group. I feel like there are a few teams that make a good amount of sense for them to go out and get him. I wouldn't consider the Knicks high up on that list. I think they're better off just rolling with their guys. Giannis, like, let's just explore the possibility quickly because why not? I think it's highly improbable, but definitely not impossible. Because when I first saw the rumors, I thought, okay, there's no way they can get it done with Cat and swaps. They have no first round picks they're able to trade other than one, a Wizards pick that's going to become 2 seconds. Then yesterday, I saw a post by Eric Pincus, who's going to run, he's a manager of Sports Bits' Classroom. You guys can see the link in the description about that. He came up with something that involves Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, which value-wise, I feel like that is probably what it's going to be necessary from the Knicks at a minimum to get something done like that. And the way it would work, he is like, what if you send Mikal to a team that highly values him? They send multiple picks and young players to the Bucks. Same thing with OG, same structure like that. So as far as the salary cap goes, they send 10 million more than Giannis' salary. That works. They could do that. They even bring in like another $10 million left over through another player. And then maybe the Bucks end up getting like a lot of young players and draft picks that like kind of make sense to them more so than bringing in Mikal or OG if they're going to enter like a rebuild. But for the most, so like I would say it's still very impossible that's still very improbable that still happens. But even if that was something that was on the table, if Giannis was really angling for it, I mean, I don't know. I still don't know how I feel about, like, you can come out of it saying, okay, maybe you could come up with an acceptable offer for the Bucks, but if you're the Knicks also, do you trade both guys to get Giannis? I think for some people it's kind of a no-brainer. I don't know. It's kind of tough for me.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that so many things would have to fall into place for this to be a real conversation, particularly Giannis demanding a trade, which obviously hasn't happened yet. And based on those comments to the overseas outlet is not going to happen. But let's say, for example, that he did, he would then have to tell the Bucks, look, I just want to go to the Knicks. And then the Bucks would have to say, you've been great for us your whole career. We're going to do you a solid here. We're going to send you exactly where you want to go, and accept an offer from New York that would be much, much less valuable than offers they can get from other teams. So you're talking about a lot of things falling into place there for the Knicks. But if, let's say, hypothetically, it was on the table, yeah, see, Towns for Giannis and some other, not, I don't want to
Yeah,
say
like just one more, like just a
filler.
small,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah, basically.
Yeah, I would assume that that's where you'd go as opposed to breaking up those wings. I certainly don't think the Knicks would want to lose both of those wings. So I think that if it came to Giannis getting his way being leaving Milwaukee, coming to New York, and Milwaukee facilitating that, I would assume it's Towns. I assume that that's the way it would go. But again, we're a long way from that being a real conversation.
Last thing on that, technically, the Knicks could get both guys. They could do, like I said, Mikal and OG for for Giannis and like one other guy, like making around 10 mil. Then do like you just suggested, package Cat and a like minimum guy to match for KD. Technically, it's possible. It's all like sat within the salary cap rules. I don't know how I feel about. I mean, that's definitely a monster big three, but I feel like the Knicks are. I think I'd just stick with the depth. So that might sound crazy to some people, but I like what they've got going, especially in a more wide open East next year. They went into this season, with kind of like a rushed offseason in a way where they put this team together very quickly. They got Cat on the eve of training camp. Now they're going to have some continuity. I feel like, now you're going to bring in a new coach. Just I feel like for the most part, the most likely scenario, it's just they're going to run it back for them and see what happens. But I do think it's worth exploring. Maybe they tinker a little bit, because if they run it back, which they probably will, they'll work on filling out the bench. It's going to be a pretty tight squeeze filling it out no matter what. Like, it's probably going to be mostly minimum guys again. They could bring in someone with the tax pyramid level, that 5.7 million, while staying below the second apron, because using that hard caps them. They could alternatively maybe trade for someone making roughly that amount while being able to fill out the roster. So I guess then at that point, you got your top four guys, and and then you've got like Josh Hart, Mitchell Robinson. I think it's definitely worth asking if they feel like it might be worth just completely running it back and just seeing like who are the best minimum guys they could get, versus maybe do they consider moving one of their top six guys, preferably like Hart or Mitchell Robinson, just to break those salaries up into multiple guys to get a little deeper. Like, for example, if they could turn Hart, his $20 million salary, into maybe two $10 million players, something like that, could that be something worth considering? Or,
I think
could you get a, yeah, cause it just depends what they could get, I guess.
right, and I think a big factor here, maybe not big, but a factor for sure would be who's coaching the team, and then what that coach's preferences are. If that coach says, "Hey, I can make it work with this group. Let's give it a shot." Then there you have it. But if that coach says, "Look, the depth that you guys had last season was horrendous. I need an upgrade here, 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 and here," and the Knicks obviously be willing to work with that coach because they hired him. I think that'll tell you a lot when and if they make that decision on the next head coach. I think that'll inform you on what they do with this offseason, and particularly looking at the bench. I mean, excuse me, Yasi, I want to ask one question. Could they trade off of salary to the point where they get under the first apron and then have access to that bigger exception? I know they get hard capped, but is that even mathematically possible?
It's possible. It would probably realistically involve Hart, though. If they could trade him, either get off his salary completely or get like maybe a rookie scale player, just someone making very little, then not only do they get below the first apron, but enough below it where they could use the entire mid-level exception. Uh, so I guess that kind of makes sense if you can get a lot for a guy like Josh Hart. If you can get maybe like a very promising young player who makes a lot less, maybe some draft picks to restock. They're down a lot of draft picks after the Mikal Bridges trade. That could make some sense, and then you go after somebody like a real difference maker in free agency.
Yeah, and then you do get hard cap there, but I think just in a general sense, when you talk about Hart, um, if it's Hart or Robinson, and we're kind of ranking, the more likely trade candidate. If the Knicks are going to make a trade, I think Robinson's the more likely candidate there. 1 year left on his deal. A fantastic player when he's healthy. Really
Yeah.
energizes the Knicks in a way that no one else can when he's healthy, when he's making plays. Obviously, hasn't been healthy that much, but to me, if you're looking at the group that just lost to Indiana in 6 games, I know there are flaws, and I know that there are areas that need to be addressed. But I wonder if the Knicks think, hey, with the new head coach, whoever it's going to be, maybe they can squeeze some more out of the group so we don't have to go ahead and get off of a rotation player here. We can just kind of pick and choose with our exception, with the veterans minimum, go after targets in free agency and get guys that we trust are going to be able to help us, and get them here with the promise of maybe playing time, maybe a bigger role in New York, and see how that goes.
Yeah, and I do think they're gonna definitely be in the lookout for some veterans that could join on the minimum. Maybe there's gonna be, you know, quote unquote, like a long line of talented guys looking to join. Because now it's much different, the approach, compared to last season, where they couldn't, like, they had that tax pyramid level in play last year. They didn't end up using it. It ended up all working out because they got exactly they had exactly the flexibility they needed to eventually do the cat trade, and get it while staying under the second apron. So now it's like, no, now we're looking for the best bench players who could join. Obviously, there is a spot right now with that tax pyramid level. If somebody wants to get that, whoever wants to come join, come get it first. So I do think they'll have an advantage now. It's much different when the focus last year was reshaping the core versus now let's get as deep as possible. And I think that could bring in a lot more interest from some of the best veterans out there. So I mean, yeah, I don't expect too much. I know we went over like the big names in case they do something drastic like that, but I think for the most part, it's gonna be just touching up here and there, trying to get the bench as deep as possible. It's probably the more most likely scenario. But we have a little bit of time. I suppose we might as well discuss the coaching search. So, so as we know, last week, Tom Thibodeau was relieved of his duties. I discussed this on the podcast last week. Kind of feels like maybe they were trending towards this for a while, just based on how quickly it was. But now you've reported some of the names they've been linked to, notably Jason Kidd, Ime Udoka, Chris Finch. So far, seems like they keep things pretty close to the vest. But it just seems so far they mostly want guys that might not be at all available. So I mean, how do you feel about some of these candidates? And are are you a little concerned that they went out and fired Thibodeau while not potentially not having a guy that they want to target like actually available?
Yeah, I can see, process wise, how that would concern Knick fans, anxious to see what the next move is. Because, usually Leon Rose is deliberate, looks at the whole board before he pulls the trigger on something. And so I just, based on everything that I know, I don't think this was that. I don't think they had one guy in the bag, plan B, ready to go if plan A falls through. I don't get the sense that that was the case. And so now, you're looking at multiple candidates. The three names that you mentioned, I believe have been on their radar, but I think my guy Kelly Eco reported about Houston having no interest and Ime Udoka having no interest in divorcing there. And I believe that report. I've heard similar things that's the case, and it was the case when he reported, and it's the case today. So it seems like Udoka is not an option now. Jason Kidd, I mean, look, this this could work if and only if Jason Kidd forces the issue, because Dallas, from everything that I can gather, has zero interest in allowing Jason Kidd to walk. But if Jason, talks to Nico or even ownership and says, "Listen, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. They're offering me X. It's just impossible for me to try to turn this down." Then maybe you get some traction there. But until you get to that point, assuming Dallas holds steadfast here and not granting the Knicks permission to speak with Jason Kidd, then then it's kind of plan B there. And then the list is much different. But I do think with Kidd, there is a sliver of possibility here where you can work your way around your current contract. And I would also say, like, if the Knicks go ahead and offered Kidd like a 5-year deal, a big deal, I think he's under contract for 2 more years in Dallas. Worst case scenario for him, he can work that into a bigger contract in Dallas, and they could tack on a couple of years to have him stay in Dallas. So it seems like a win-win for Jason Kidd. And again, a lot of Kidd has to make a lot of things happen in order for it to work out for New York.
Yeah, definitely the big winner of all this speculation is Jason Kidd because, yeah, you could come out with more money out of this, whether it's a deal with the Knicks or maybe this can, get him to restructure his deal with the Mavs. And most likely, for the Mavs, while there hasn't been any like official denying of like that they want to, they haven't like denied this, like they didn't say, oh, we want to keep him like the Rockets did with Udoka. They could get something out of this if the Knicks do go out a little harder to bring him in. The Knicks can offer, they have like 9 second-round picks that they can offer. Kidd has been traded from the Nets to the Bucks, I believe, for 2 second-round picks. So maybe the Mavs could get a little more than that. As as a coach, I feel like he's fine. Not sure he's that much of an improvement over Tibbs. He just continues to be really influential within getting some of the best coaching jobs in the NBA, from Nets to Mavs and potentially the Knicks now. Udoka would be a lot more interesting, I think, but it sounds like that's not going to happen. Chris Finch would be really interesting if they could somehow get him out of Minnesota. Worth noting, he is Gerson Rosas' guy. Gerson did hire him mid-season 5 years ago while he was an assistant for, I believe, the Raptors. So maybe he can, maybe he can pull it off again, but I doubt it. Minnesota just went way too far in the playoffs. So, hopefully I'll just say this. Hopefully that there is someone that, like, whoever the worst case scenario that would be is like there's someone available that they went into this process feeling like, yeah, if we can come out with this guy, we're good. And hopefully it's someone we haven't heard yet, because like I mentioned, they've done a pretty good job not leaking out really any names that they're interested in.
Yeah, it's interesting because money is going to drive this thing. And you talk about money. Tom Thibodeau is owed at least $30 million on that extension. So the Knicks owner, James Dolan, is going to be paying out Tom Thibodeau and presumably will be paying top dollar for this next head coach, and everything you hear out of there, especially in the aftermath of their loss to Indiana, was he's um, hell bent. Maybe that's too strong, but just wants to win a championship, and is viewing things as the organization is through that prism. And maybe it sounds cliche, but then you see what happened with Tom Thibodeau, and if you're viewing it through that prism, whether you agree with it or not, it's a move that you could see as a possibility. And so, how does that inform the head coaching hire moving forward here? How does that inform their offseason? I do know that that's how he's viewing things in general, and that's how the organization is approaching things.
So I think we've touched about just about everything with the Knicks as far as, just the coaching and the bench, but I'll just leave with one thing, is that I've just really enjoyed watching the Knicks the past few years, and not just on the court, but like everything they've done off the court, because everyone's looking at what the Pacers have done, and to get to this point, but the Knicks also, they're right there as far as completing one of the most successful middle builds in recent memory, because they went into this with really only a couple solid draft picks before Leon Rose came in, with RJ Barrett, Mitchell Robinson. They had one great signing in Julius Randle. Not the greatest hand to start with, but over the past 5 years, pretty good draft picks here and there. Quickly, Grimes, McBride, little moves, but it all adds up. And they absolutely crushed it in free agency, signing Jalen Brunson, Isaiah Hartenstein, Dante DiVincenzo. And all of this came together where they're able to consolidate all these players and whatever draft picks they have left and put together this top 5-6 guys it's a roster full of transplants that's a championship contender. And this is what not every single, but like a lot of NBA teams now, ever since lottery reform, ever since the implementation of the play-in tournament, this is what they want. They want to be able to not have to enter like a whole rebuild and accumulate draft picks and go through the pain of losing, and through several shrewd moves, be able to put together a contender. And not only did the Knicks come out of this a championship contender, like it could have gone pretty bad. Like this path often burns teams, punishes them for if they make any slight misstep. And so like, just, I got to give a lot of credit to them for not only making it without another potential, 5 years to a decade of what it's been the last 25 years or so, but just being able to become a championship contender. And also everything they've done in a salary cap perspective, just has been like to a T. Everything's been perfect. How they structured the Mikal cat trade, just a personal thing. I've really enjoyed their moves from a cap perspective.
I remember talking to you about the Towns trade, and just talking about Brock Aller and those guys, and how everything was kind of sequenced in a way where it was like to the decimal point, how it all lined up. And look, that trade is going to define Leon Rose to a great degree. And of course, the Mikal Bridges trade is going to define Leon Rose to a great degree, whether those guys are here for several years down the line or they are used in a trade to acquire someone else. So it's going to be interesting. And I'll just say quickly on Milwaukee and Giannis, because you mentioned like there's not a big appetite to blow things up and start from the bottom. And also Milwaukee not having a ton of draft capital anyway. I would assume that they're looking for an impact player. If, again, Giannis coming out and saying to that overseas outlet that he wants to go for a title with Milwaukee, so it's probably all moot. But it just popped into my head as you were talking about the Knicks rebuild.
Yeah. So, yeah, we'll see what happens as far as the Knicks go, but I think we pretty much covered it. I want to say should be a quieter offseason, but you never know. You never know what the Knicks got up their sleeve. They might. I did not see the Mikal Bridges trade coming. Even though there were kind of whispers of the cat trade, I still couldn't believe they could get it done after giving up all their picks for Bridges. So we'll just have to wait and see. It might be a more exciting offseason than expected. But Ian, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate your time. You got anything coming up we should be on the lookout for?
Nothing on the near term here. I'll just be kind of cranking out reporting on what's happening with the coaching search and potential offseason moves and keeping an eye around the league. And also, man, I just want to enjoy the finals because I like the matchup a lot. OKC, Indiana, obviously Halliburton hitting that shot game one. I'm looking forward to the rest of this series and to see how things play out.
Yeah, should be a fun one. But again, thanks, Ian. You make sure you all are following Ian on Twitter at Ian Begley and check out all his work on SNY. And make sure you're following me again at Yossi Gallison on Twitter, Blue Sky. I'll have all sorts of salary cap, instant analysis when transactions happen. Subscribe to Third Apron wherever you get your podcast and the newsletter on Substack. And make sure to, if you guys are interested in coming to see us in Summer League, we'll be there in Vegas. I've got a link in the description about Sports Business Classroom. I'll be one of the instructors there. Check the link in the description. You can see a little bit more what that program's about. Thanks, everyone.